Hello, welcome to my channel, Rilany Creations. My name is Wendy, and today we'll make this beaded loom bracelet together. First, I will show you how to set up the loom, and then we will do the first few columns together. Once we have done those columns, you will get a hang of it and be able to add the rest of the columns yourself. I will provide you with the pattern 5 columns at a time so that we can check back in every 5 columns to make sure that your pattern matches with mine. And when you have completed all of the columns, I will show you how to finish off the bracelets. In addition to this pattern, I also have a bee with flowers pattern, grapes pattern, and I plan to create more patterns, and all of my patterns will be on Etsy. So if you like to make beaded loom bracelets, or after making this bracelet you find it quite fun and you want to make more, then check out my Etsy. I will have patterns on there. You can find the link in the descriptions and also a discount code. To make loom bracelets, you can use seed bead or delica bead. I am using size 11 Miyuki bead. This one is made with a size 11 Miyuki seed bead. This one is made using Miyuki size 11 delica bead. And you can see this one actually has more columns than this one. But even though they are both size 11, seed beads are wider, while delica beads are skinnier or not as wide. So I actually had to make quite a few more columns just to get it to this width, and it's still shorter than this one here. So I would say, for myself at least, I would prefer using seed beads just so I don't have to do as much work to get the same results. This one I used the same red beads for all of the strawberries and same green beads for all of kind of the green part, the leaf part of the strawberry. This one here, I don't know if you can tell from the video, but my strawberries are actually different color of reds. It's because I don't have enough of the same color. I have different greens and then different reds. In this video, I will tell you to add, let's say, red or green, and you can use the same red or green beads for all of the strawberries, or you can mix and match like what I'm doing here. But in the pattern, I would just say add your white bead, add your green bead, and add your red bead. So you would just add according to whatever you have. You will also need a loom, thread, and needle. I am using Miyuki white thread and a big eye needle. First, let's set up the loom. First of all, this loom I have here, it only cost me $6.99. I've been able to make bracelets with it. It gets the job done. The bracelet we're going to make today has 16 rows. So to make 16 rows of beads, we need 17 pieces of thread. So for me, this loom here, I need about 14 inches of thread. So I'm going to cut 17 pieces of 14-inch thread. So depending on how wide your loom is, you're going to need to cut maybe longer threads, but you need 17 of them. I have all 17 threads that I cut here. I'm holding them all together like this. And then so on the top, I'm going to tie a knot. Okay, so like this. I'm going to tie another knot on this side. Here I am straightening the threads before tying the knot, hoping that they will be the same length after I tie the knot, but oftentimes that's not going to be the case. I finished tying both knots, and as you can see, there are a few strands that are longer than the rest, but that is okay. I'll show you a way to work with it later. I'm going to change the angle of the video now and start adding the thread to the loom. My loom has this thing sticking out like a nail which holds the thread, and it can also be adjusted like this. We will start by splitting the thread in half so that we can hook it on the nail. I'm going to use my hands to pick up the thread and start separating them so that eventually I will have 17 rows of thread. What I like to do is take the loose ones and put them further out since they are longer. My threads still seem pretty long, so I'm going to adjust my loom and stretch them more. Alright, so just keep spreading them one at a time until you have them all spread out. I finished spreading off the threads. I now have 17 rows of evenly spread out thread, but as you can see, there are a few loose threads. So what I'm going to do is I will use some tape to hold it down. The thread is so much better now, but before we add the beads, let's talk about bracelet length so we know how much thread we need to string the beads. My bracelet here is 64 columns. There's a column here and here in the tube, but there's 64 columns total. And I think I am like a size medium bracelet. So here, there's not that much space left, right? So with 64 columns, this is how it fits on my wrist. Because I have a column inside the tubes, so it's a little bit longer than 5 inches of bracelet. And if you include the silver part, it is almost 5.5 inches of bracelet. So I have 64 columns here. If you want to do a small bracelet, then maybe try to do 58 columns instead, meaning you can skip the first 3 here and the last 3 here. And if you want to make a large bracelet, I would just do the opposite, which is adding 3 more columns on each side. So going from 64 to 70 columns total. And those columns that you add can just be all white columns. To make a medium-sized bracelet with 64 columns, I have 11.5 feet of thread here. If you're making a shorter bracelet, you can do maybe 10.5 feet, and then a longer bracelet, you want to do 12.5 feet of thread. Let's put the thread through the needle and then add our first column of beads, which is 16 white beads. Bring the beads almost all the way to the end of the thread, leaving about 6 inches for the tail. Put your beads under the 17 rows of thread and then place 1 bead between every 2 threads. Run your needle through all of the beads, but this time make sure your needle is above the 17 rows of thread. Be patient and take your time with each bead. The first 3 columns are going to be somewhat hard, but after you have 3 columns down, then the rest of the columns are going to be way easier. Here is a closer look. I have 1 bead between every 2 thread. So now I am going to pull the needle and thread all the way through. Now that I have the first row of beads in, I am going to pull the farthest thread and bring it in a little bit so that I can tighten my row of beads a little bit more. Now let's add our second column of beads, which is 6 white, 1 green, and 9 more whites. We are going to bring the beads under the 17 rows of thread again, and we're going to place 1 bead between every 2 threads. Next, we will run the needle through the beads. Make sure your needle is above the 17 rows of thread. I was actually missing a bead here, but I forgot to press record when I was fixing it, so make sure you don't make the same mistake as me and make sure that you have 16 beads. Pull the needle and thread all the way through. This is how I check to see if I place my needle above all of the threads. I push it up to see if any will pop up. Let's add our third column of beads, which is 5 white, 1 green, 3 red, and 7 whites. The steps from here on are the same. We'll place the beads under the 17 rows of thread, placing 1 bead between every 2 threads, and then we'll run our needle through the beads, making sure that the needle is above the 17 rows of thread. Checking here to make sure that I place the needle above all of the threads before I pull the needle and thread all the way through. Now that we have 3 columns, we can pull and tighten the thread and beads a little bit more. It will make it a lot easier for us to add the beads moving forward. Time to add the 4th column, which is 4 white, 1 green, 4 red, and 7 white. Alright, the steps are going to be the same, but as you can see here, it is so much easier to place the beads between the threads now. going to check and make sure I didn't miss any threads before pulling the needle and thread all the way through. Let's add our 5th column, which is 5 white, 4 red, and 7 white. The steps are the same, so I would just speed through it. If you want a PDF copy of the pattern, feel free to let me know in the comments and I will send you one through email. Let's add column 6, which is 16 white beads. This is the last column we'll add together. After this, I will share the pattern with you 5 columns at a time so that we can check in every 5 columns and make sure that your pattern looks consistent with mine. And when we get to the end, I will show you how to finish off the bracelet. I have a very good example here when a thread is missed. You see how when I pull on this, the thread is above the beads and needle? I'm going to check the rest of the threads and then we'll fix that. Let's check again to make sure we didn't miss any threads before pulling the needle and thread all the way through. Okay, this is how it should look after the first 6 columns. This is the pattern for columns 7 to 11, and this is how it should look like after you are done. Here is the pattern for columns 12 to 16, and this is how it should look like after you are done. Pattern for columns 17 to 20, and how it looks like after you complete them. The pattern for columns 21 to 25. The pattern for columns 26 to 30. The pattern for columns 31 to 35. The pattern for columns 36 to 40. The pattern for columns 41 to 45. The pattern for columns 46 to 49. The pattern for columns 50 to 54. The pattern for columns 55 to 59. And this is the pattern for our last 5 columns, columns 60 to 64. Yay, we did it! We finished all of the columns. So now I'm going to take the tail and weave it through the beads a couple of times to lock it in, and then I will cut off extra thread. So right now the thread is coming out of the last column of beads like this. I'm going to take the needle and put it through a couple of beads in the next column like this. And then I'm going to bring the thread all the way through. My thread is coming out of this bead here. I'm going to take my needle and put it through a couple of beads in the next column like this. Basically, I'm just repeating these steps a couple more times, zigzagging through a couple more columns. This is the last column I'm going to do, and I will bring my needle all the way out. Next, we'll cut off the extra thread. Make sure to pull and straighten the thread when cutting it off. Okay, we are done with this side. Make sure to repeat on the other side. Zigzag that tail a couple of times before cutting it off. Alright, now that we have tucked in the tails and cut off the extra thread, we'll remove this from the loom, and I will show you how to get rid of these extra threads here on each side. We will start by cutting the thread near the knots on both sides. Run your fingers through the beads, smooth them out a little bit so that they don't bunch up together. Next, we'll prepare the beads so that we can slide the last column of beads through this tube here. In order to slide the beads through the tube without the beads bunching up, we need to leave a gap here like this. I just use my nails to push the beads out. Next, we will grab 2 threads at a time and tie 2 knots. When tying the knots, do it gently. You don't want to push the beads together, you want to leave the gap. The knots can be slightly loose, we will apply glue to it later. Grab the next 2 threads and tie 2 knots again. Keep repeating these steps of tying 2 threads together each time, but since there are 17 threads, you will notice that when you get to the end, there's going to be 3 extra threads. So let me show you what to do with those 3 threads. Grab the last thread on the side and put it through this first bead like this. Now you have 2 threads in the same place. You can grab them as if they are 1 thread and tie it with the thread next to it. Alright, so keep repeating these steps of tying 2 threads together and make sure to repeat on the other side of the bracelet as well. And once you have tied all the threads together, I will show you what to do next. Now that we have knotted both sides, let's apply some glue on the knots. This is the glue that I use. I do like it because it dries pretty fast. And I bought this from Amazon. The reason why I bought this was because it came in 3 small tubes. And you know, the thing with glues is that once you open it, sometimes it dries up and hardens up and you can no longer use the glue. So I like the fact that it came with 3 tubes so that even if one dries up, I still have 2 more glue to use. I will include links in the description for most of the materials I am using today. What I do is I take a wire that I have, or you can use a toothpick, and then I grab some glue with it and apply it to the thread. So my glue, it does have a tip like this, but I don't like using the tip because when the glue comes out this way, it ends up drying up and blocking the hole. So instead of grabbing glue from here, I actually open it from this side here in the middle, and then I put my wire through to grab the glue. Okay, so let's apply some glue on the knots. Make sure that there is still a gap between the beads. In case if you apply glue to the beads, you want to make sure that you create this gap before the beads dry up and you can no longer move them. I'm going to grab more glue and repeat. I like to apply more glue just in case. Once you are done with this side, be sure to repeat on the other side as well. Once you have applied glue to both sides, place it on something like this so that the sides with the glue is not touching anything. Maybe leave it alone for an hour or so to let it air dry. The glue has dried, so I'm going to cut off the extra thread and then put the bead through the tube. I'm just doing a rough cut right now to get rid of some of the extra thread. I will clean it up a little bit more and then repeat on the other side. I like to use a chain nose plier to open up the tubes more so that it would be easier to put the beads through. We are going to put the first column of beads inside the tube. We will slide it through using the gap that we created earlier. This part can be easy or hard depending on how the beads are aligned, but if you're having a hard time, just wiggle the beads around and then it will eventually go in. But you also want to be careful and not be too rough, otherwise the thread might break. I have a little bit of thread sticking out, so I'm just going to cut it off and then use my hand to close the cover. Repeat these steps on the other side. Last step is to add the lobster clasp and chain extender. Alright, we have completed the bracelet. As I mentioned earlier, if you want a PDF copy of the pattern, let me know in the comments and I will send it to you. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!